There were once a number of families here and kids playing in this courtyard. There were kids going back and forth to the schools, to the store down the street, and it was a safe environment. This is the impact of neglect. This is the impact of blight. This is the impact of urban sprawl. The question is how do we stabilize this? We have units here just literally yards across the street from 2 schools.
There's a rebirth, if you will, around what the neighborhood school can mean to a community. There have been so much negativity over the span of 20 years as a result of just the transient nature of the neighborhood that I thought, like, we need to rebrand this. We need to create something that the folk that currently live here can connect to and say, this is ours.
When you see our school and then you see vacant buildings around it, then parents are questioning that. Is this really a good school? Is this really a good neighborhood? Should I have my child here?
So we drew a small circle, a mile plus or minus radius around Fraser Elementary and MLK College Preparatory School. Collectively, we figured out that we needed to do something small and have impact so that the students and their families have a good option for housing that's nearby where the kids can literally walk out the front door and be at school in a matter of minutes.
We have to go out, we have to seek the incentives, we have to find the subsidies that exist, and we have to rebuild and make it better for everyone.
What we're also doing, we actually partnered with another nonprofit, the Works Incorporated, to help us provide us with an advantage in terms of getting tax credits, because there is an advantage in having a nonprofit that has experience.
Early summer 16, so it's 3.5.
Yeah, and I think
3.5
I
approaching
got
4.
involved in the spring of 17, late
Right.
winter, spring.
Initial talks.
Well, when we applied for the first tax credit.
Right.
So the idea is that a nonprofit will own these, and in the tax credit world, the major economic benefit to the project sponsors, the people involved, is in the development process through development fees, which actually get counted toward what we call basis, which helps you get more credit. So it's kind of baked into the overall strategy and structure.
I was drawn to this project because of the work of one of my partners, CompCap, which is a for-profit company that does a lot of work around affordable housing. The costs were high, higher than any of the projects I've done, which have been new construction projects in multifamily. And so this rehab, knew it was going to be hard, huge project, but we did not win the tax credits in the first year, so they took us another year. We got to apply. And meanwhile, the development partners are not being paid, but we are so committed to this work that we're going to do this till we get it done.
No one is doing rehabs as massive of or substantial. You know, we're spending almost 18 million here.
You really can't make money on affordable housing, particularly in a city like Memphis, or if you try to make money, you will end up hurting either your residents or not properly maintaining your property, because the economics just don't work.
So we tried to find financing love in Memphis, but we had to go online and date another city, and we found it very quickly. It was love at first sight, and we eloped together with a bank out of Boston.
The pitch to them was, if you help with the upfront capital, the pre-development costs, let us do what we know how to do from a financing standpoint and redevelopment standpoint. We think we can get these properties redeveloped and make them a whole lot nicer than they have been in decades or maybe ever, and provide quality housing at rents where the people that you're trying to help in schools can actually live there and benefit from.
Memphis has a crisis around affordable housing. We're 30,000 units down in quality affordable housing.
Unfortunately, we just will not have enough units. We have hundreds applying every time I walk up.
Are y'all taking applications right now?
Yeah, we've started giving out applications, but you're not supposed to be on site unless you're a contractor. But if you have a pen, I can give you the number to call.
We wanted to be a part of a solution that served families. So how can we prove to our local bank community, our other developers, investors, that we have value, this area has value, and we want to invest. And so we'll do our part in diminishing that huge gap in quality affordable housing.
The work that they're doing really is a testament to what can be done when we have strong CDCs and CDC leaders with a vision.
There's a synergy around the work that is infectious. And I really feel like it is about to happen as folks move back into these complexes and we stabilize this block. The pride that we've helped to reinstill, we feel like we're going to be able to prove the possible.
The Renaissance at Steel project can be a great example to see replicated all across the city.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Tanja Mitchell, and I'll be introducing the panelists for this session. I am the Director of Community Engagement for The Works Incorporated. The Works is a nonprofit CDC serving South Memphis and the greater Memphis area. We are dedicated to the holistic renaissance of our community through the provisions of services in the areas of housing, economic, education, and as the Director of Community Engagement, I'm responsible for innovating, leading, and managing our volunteer and events program. Prior to joining the Works, I was the Chief Impact Officer for the Memphis and Shelby County Community Redevelopment Agency, focusing on neighborhood sustainability in Uptown. As we are all aware, oftentimes in development, people are lost in large-scale development and planning process. Today, we will learn how to bring people back into the mix from successful, impactful, and powerful women doing the work. And I'm calling this group Girl Power Panelists. So first we have Abby Miller. Abby is a public service professional with more than 15 years of experience in program design and management, evaluation, communications, and resource. Okay, she currently works as Vice President for the Memphis Medical District Collaborative. Prior to that, she most recently worked as Program and Data Manager with Innovate Memphis on neighborhood economic vitality and blight removal. Ashley Cash. Ashley is the administrator of the Office of Comprehensive Planning for the City of Memphis. Her recent project has focused on developing the first comprehensive plan for the City of Memphis in nearly 40 years. Ashley has worked over the past 10 years in various areas of community development. Ashley's work has centered on quality of life, planning, and ensuring that all neighborhoods have equitable access to basic needs, opportunities, and amenities. She is experienced in managing and implementing complex projects and leading teams to success. Haddon Lowe. Did I say that right, Tracy? Yay! Dr. Lowe is a fellow with the Ann and Robert Bass Center for Transformative Placemaking at the Brookings Institution. Prior to joining Brookings, Dr. Lowe was a senior data scientist at the George Washington University School of Business. She was previously the director of research at the Rail to Trails Conservancy. She is a graduate of DC Public Schools and holds a PhD in city and regional planning from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Dr. Lowe's research focuses on commercial real estate and how place-level assets interact and affect the people and enterprises that call a place home. She has recently written about the impact of COVID-19 on the retail sector and the need for governance reform to address inequality in metropolitan regions. Please go to the main page to learn more about our panelists. Because if I would have read the entire bio, we would have been here to 5 o'clock because they are so accomplished. Now I turn it over to our moderator, Ashley Cash, to start the discussion.
Thanks, Tanja. And it is an honor to be with all of you beautiful ladies and to have everyone here today. I think it's a little rainy, a little cloudy. I'm coming to you from my daughter's bedroom. She is in another space in the house doing virtual learning. So please disregard anything you see in the background that may be distracting to you. With that, I'm excited about a great session. Tracy, I'm going to turn it over to you. And just for all the panelists, I am keeping an eye on time. So no need to stress about that. Tracy, if you want to just share your screen and get us started. What we're talking about today is catalytic development. And we have 3 perspectives here, all great. Well, actually, we have 4 perspectives. 3 we're specifically presenting on, and then Tanja is going to join us again at the end within the. But really, what we're thinking about is from a national perspective. What is catalytic development? How does it work? What does it take? What is the city's strategy from the local perspective? And that's where I'll share a little bit about the planning process, not so much the planning process, but a lot of the planning outcomes and what we've been able to accomplish so far. And then Abby will give us a what I'm calling a hyper local perspective. So a neighborhood level or a district level perspective on development and what that looks like. And so with that, Tracy, I will turn it over to you. And then when you wrap up, I'll just share my screen and jump in as well.
Okay, so I'm trying to share my screen now, but that means that I actually can't see the conference interface. So can I get some audio feedback from y'all? Can anyone, are people seeing a slide?
Yes, we see your slide and we see you.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, so what I'm gonna try to do here really quick so that we can get to discussion is I'm just gonna lay out a little bit of my research, defining what is catalytic development, talking about why it's happening these days, and then what are some of the big issues with it that would be great to get into discussing today. Little bit about me and where I work. I work at the Bass Center at the Brookings Metropolitan Policy Program, and the Bass Center is all about studying the field of practice around building an inclusive place economy, and specifically trying to advance that field of practice and to uncover and elevate the best new ideas about how to do development in a way that works for more people and more places. So I hope you'll check us out online and see a little bit more about all our work. But you know, why catalytic development, which we also sometimes call transformative placemaking? Okay, the reason why this is happening is because the reason why cities function as economic entities is shifting. You know, as our national economy goes through a structural transition, and cities are caught in the middle of that transition, and they're grappling with a lot of legacy, policy, and infrastructure impacts that are a built environment that was constructed for a different economic era, but is still here with us today, and that we need to make work for the people of today. And this change isn't all bad. There are some positive things that are good for cities about what's going on, but there's also some problems, and we need to figure out how to solve those problems. So let's talk a little bit more about why this is happening. Okay, so many of you have hopefully heard of Jane Jacobs. She wrote a very cool book called The Death and Life of Great American Cities that I still go back to sometimes, years after reading it, for ideas. And she wrote about two different models of urban development. One she called gradual money, and one she called cataclysmic money. She wrote this book during the urban renewal period. And so when she was talking about cataclysmic money, she was talking both about the big push to complete the interstate highway system and the devastating impacts that those highways had on center cities in terms of where they were placed, especially on Black neighborhoods. And then she was also talking about the big push around that time to also build a new generation of social housing, but that used a mega project approach to build really big public housing developments that often through eminent domain, and that really changed the fabric of some urban neighborhoods. So if we think about these, she was writing about, this as a financing model, but if you think about what this actually looks like in terms of urban form, you can picture the traditional urban infrastructure that's found in many US cities that predates the automobile, that predates World War II, and that feels urban. You can also picture in the post-war period, the period when Jane Jacobs was writing, this auto-oriented infrastructure this is also a very familiar sight, even in downtowns, right? This is not just something that's happening out at the urban fringe somewhere. You will see this kind of form even in the urban core. And this is some of the stuff that Jane Jacobs was calling cataclysmic money. So when we talk about catalytic development, we're talking about a concept that draws from both of those columns. What's going on in the US right now, in the bigger picture of the economy, is that as manufacturing declines and the knowledge economy grows in terms of how many jobs it provides and what share of our productivity it is, we're seeing really new forces that are increasing density and concentration in urban areas, but we also see some powerful forces that are dispersing urban areas and that are pushing some development to the fringe. And then we also see a legacy, but also ongoing and persistent segregation by income and by race. And these three dynamics are shaping the urban landscape that we see today. But the big picture here from a data perspective is that the knowledge economy is becoming the economy. And that's changing what we need from cities and what cities do for the country. Some of it is good, but some of it is also creating new problems. So the good news is that cities have an important role to play in the national economy, and that cities are going to be the setting and the future of prosperity and growth for the United States. We know that higher job density corresponds to higher productivity. This is a finding of a report that the Bass Center put out last year. And while this relationship is not strictly linear, we found that this is a correlation that generally holds true. And we also found that in addition to looking at productivity, that if we focus in on innovation, that cities are the future of innovation, and that urban locations produce more patents and more startups. And we know that that productivity and that innovation has a material market value. And so when we look at what's happening in terms of the kinds of prices that commercial real estate in prime urban settings can command, we're seeing big price premiums as employers recognize that that additional productivity and that additional innovation has material value to their enterprises. And so this is all good news for cities. The problem is that the knowledge economy is favoring some workers over others. And so what we're seeing on this graph is that workers in highly digital occupations, so like software developers, but this could also include workers in finance, they far out-earn workers in low digital occupations, like those in food service and preparation or security guards. And that higher wages are disproportionately going to some groups of workers over others. So while Black, Latino, and Asian workers are 37% of the US workforce, they represent almost 50% of those employed in low-tech jobs like care aides, food service, and construction. So that's a structural problem. Another structural problem is that these inequities aren't just impacting people, they're also dividing places. So while we see across the country a booming digital economy, it's rewarding large global centers that are attracting your Amazons and your Googles and your Microsofts and their highly educated workers. But older industrial cities and heartland communities, especially smaller to mid-sized cities, are struggling to keep up. We found that since 2005, just 5 metro areas, Boston, the San Francisco Bay Area, San Jose, Seattle, and San Diego, accounted for 90% of all US growth in innovation sector jobs. That's a problem. So the good news is that while the knowledge economy is rewarding large places, there is broader hope for the economic future of downtowns beyond just the 5 metros that I mentioned. And when we looked at downtown housing growth and population growth from 1980 to 2008, we found a much broader spectrum of metros across the United States and across size categories that are prospering and that are attractive to people. That said, even when we just look at a single region, we're also seeing many of these same trends in terms of growth and inequality playing out within regions. This is recent research from the Economic Innovation Group, and our friends over there found that there are prosperous areas within metros that are adding firms and jobs, but other communities are facing decline and disinvestment. And these trends are thus reinforcing, or frankly even making worse, the spatial disparities that I previously referred to in terms of the segregation that we've been left with from decades of housing and land use policies and practices that have devalued and sometimes even physically destroyed low-income and minority communities while protecting the prosperity of others. So even in strong market areas, low and moderate income residents can no longer afford to live in communities of opportunity, prime neighborhoods that are in and near growing job hubs, and that limits their ability to benefit from prosperity. In my most recent research piece, I found that census tracts with high concentrations of low-income residents also have higher shares of residents working in service occupations, a larger percentage of households with no internet, and a far lower share of homeowners. And that probably does not come as a surprise. What is particularly concerning about this finding is that this advantage disproportionately concentrates in white communities, while disadvantage concentrates in communities of color. I found that low-income neighborhoods have disproportionate concentrations of Black and Latino residents, and that means that, basically, even when we just look at low-income white people and low-income Black people, that low-income white people enjoy greater residential mobility than low-income Black people do. And so the inequality and the segregation that we see cannot just be explained by income. And there's a structurally racist dynamic at work here. And that means that we need structural solutions. If people of color, including those with higher incomes, are going to be able to benefit from the kinds of employment growth and fund services and amenities that we associate now with vibrant urban areas. So let's talk about those solutions. So I wrote a paper a couple years ago about catalytic development, which is a very particular model of urban change. In the 90s, there was a more popular conventional model of downtown redevelopment that was really contingent on urban entertainment and was about maybe legalizing gambling or trying to get a stadium or building a vibrant restaurant scene. And that was a strategy that worked for a lot of metros in terms of revitalizing and putting to work their downtown assets. Catalytic development is an emerging model that we found in multiple settings across the United States that is fundamentally different in that it is employer driven. And it begins with a big employer creating a new intersection for capital and placemaking and a kind of entrepreneurial urbanism where players that have not traditionally been involved in real estate are getting involved at the neighborhood scale. So the setting for catalytic development is often areas that are vacant. And it's catalytic development is often a reset. These are typically settings that are post-industrial and that have been abandoned because of the structural transition that the US economy is going through, or they may be settings from urban renewal projects that were either failures right out the gate or have simply reached a point now that we are 50 years past urban renewal where it's time for a big reset. And so catalytic development is characterized as a reset in a high vacancy context, but it's important to note that it's really rarely going to be the case that a place is totally empty. And so that means that there are usually, frankly, extremely vulnerable people who all that they have may be at stake in the change that is on the table with catalytic development. And what we saw in the catalytic development case studies that we looked at is that there are very tense politics around how these developments are enabled in terms of parcel assembly and entitlements, and how community benefits are negotiated. And there was a real lack of imagination around how to do that and to do it in a way that was structural as opposed to cyclical or transactional. And I hope we can talk about that today. Since I wrote that paper, also a lot has changed in terms of what's going on with case studies. I could write the paper all over again now, just talking about what's going on with Amazon and what's been going on in New York. So there are many more lessons to be learned, and I'm excited today to learn about Memphis.
Great, thank you, Tracy. That was wonderful and perfect timing, I must say. Let me share my screen as well and pull up my PowerPoint. Okay, are you seeing a gray slide says Memphis 3.0 and catalytic development? If anybody can help me out.
Yes, ma'am, I see it.
Great, thank you. I'm having the same challenge you were, where I can't see people who might be waving at me saying thumbs up. Okay, great deal.
You just
So
have to believe. Yeah, just
perfect. I'm Ashley Cash. I put my contact information on this slide, and as we go throughout, a couple of slides have our website if y'all want to look at it. I'm with the City of Memphis. I work for the Division of Planning and Development, the Comprehensive Planning Office. What we completed at the end of 2019, the Memphis 3.0 Comprehensive Plan. I just have a handful of slides that give a really brief overview so we can connect the dots. And then I want to talk a little bit about catalytic development and what we see as we felt like the plan is the start and what you really need before you start, before you begin talking about catalyzing development and really making things go, or before you're able to support it in a strategic way. So what's the plan? It's a framework for future growth. So that means future population, future jobs, investment and planning. It is also a way to support existing residents and neighborhoods. So are those places and people getting what they need? And as we move forward over the next 20 years, can we pivot and make sure that we're meeting those needs and resources? We've got a pretty major land use plan that guides land use decisions, and that being commercial, residential, industrial land, and everything kind of in between and on the outskirts. This plan was developed with broad community participation. We had about 15,000 people participate, and we still continue to work to engage people, to inform, educate, and learn from individuals who maybe were involved in the beginning and want to continue to see this work grow, and then those who also maybe weren't involved so that they can kind of help us as we work to implement this this plan across the city. So the vision statement, our mantra is really to build up, not out. So most who are familiar with Memphis know that we have in the past, over really the past 200 years, developed through sprawling conditions, developing on vacant land that's just outside our borders. So we said, as we move forward into our next century, how can we develop on, or develop, redevelop, and support what's already here, not going outside? So really building up and not out, being a city that anchors our strengths on the core, but also on neighborhoods, a city of greater connectivity and access, and a city of opportunity for all. And so really, when you think about redevelopment, if this map is a land use map, it shows our existing land use. Yellow is residential. I'm actually looking at this chart, the key, I guess, right here to my right and to your right, and I'm noticing that it's incorrect. So yellow is actually residential. It's showing that blue is residential, but that's not accurate. The majority of what you see is residential. Our city is primarily built out. And so when we as a city think about supporting areas, redeveloping in areas, we've got a city of about 325 square miles. How do we decide where to go when it's all built out? A lot of it is that residential, and we're really trying to create a city that's more accessible to individuals, a city that has more of an urban footprint and not so much a spread footprint. So how do we know where to go? When we think about catalytic development, we thought about a couple of things when developing the plan, but also as we kind of move out of the plan, move into from planning to action. It's really thinking about how to reduce risk. So in these areas that haven't seen development in a number of years, what are some of the reasons? It's because for-profit developers may not see the profit in it or the ability to break even. Nonprofit developers may not have either the partnerships or the capital, or the same thing, they may not be able to make the specific project pencil out. So we want to be able to minimize that risk when we talk about catalytic development. We want to offer some level of predictability, and so none of us can predict the future. We can just plan and hope that as things change, we're able to once again kind of pivot and make modifications as needed. But really, when we think about predictability, if you are going into an area, say you're a nonprofit developer, you're working in your neighborhood, and there's a site, and next door there's a dilapidated building, you want some level of predictability that that dilapidated building is not going to stay there forever. There are other ways to talk about predicting the future market, but really that's what we're thinking about. How can we offer that predictability? And then how can we encourage and support existing activity? I think really the key, and you see in bold, I've got must facilitate partnerships. The key is that I don't think can do it on our own. The city, the public market can't support and revitalize and redevelop areas on their own. We have to partner with private, nonprofit, philanthropic, all other types of partners. But then really to have maximum impact, you want to think about encouraging existing activity, working in an area where you can support as opposed to kind of starting off in an area by yourself. And so one way that the comprehensive plan, Memphis 3.0, has helped to develop catalytic opportunities is through what we call the anchor strategy, the anchor concept. I'm not going to read all this. I'll just read really quickly what an anchor is. You can think of it very similar to a neighborhood center. It's a place, it's a collection of places. It's not just residential, it's not just commercial, but it's a collection of places that should provide a mix of uses. Where people can go for different types of activities. So they're going for either work or school or after school or service or entertainment, but really a mix, a hub where you can start to invest in or continue to invest in, and then the benefits should be able to radiate and support the community around it. And so you can see these areas across the city. This is just a map showing where all the anchors are. And you can see those little circular areas across the city of Memphis. We developed this with community members. We went on neighborhood tours with community members, talked about assets and opportunities, and asked them to help us identify areas that they would want to see future development in areas where they consider are the key points of their community. This conversation isn't completely about the comprehensive plan, but I just wanted to throw out there and share that the plan has, major component talking about anchors and redevelopment, but we also have a lot of actions and recommendations to support other types of things. So how do we support existing neighborhood character? How do we support and promote affordability and inclusiveness? How can we support community groups, community organizations? How are we engaging community? And so these three categories are what we call the plan elements. And so if you're interested in that, you can go to our website and download. There's a shortened version of the plan summary that just talks about all of those types of recommendations. And once again, those were informed by constant communication and conversations with community members. So my last, I think that I've got 2 slides. That's the city's theory in a nutshell. And I've got 2 really short slides that show or talk about how we have been able to put those things into action very on. Like I said, the planning for this work ended at the end of last year, December of last year. And so that's still really early. Those who have been working in community development and redevelopment work know that change takes time, and you often don't see very transformative change for a while after starting on a strategy. But I just want to share some starts of what we're doing. And so I'm going to talk about 2 areas that we're working in right now. One is Binghamton. And so with catalytic development, we feel like you can support it in a multitude of ways. And just 2 short ways that I'm going to talk about are obviously direct resources, which is money, and then tools that are available to use and deploy. And so one fund that came out of the comprehensive plan was the Community Catalyst Fund. We have deployed that in a handful of places so far, and we are hoping to continue to get sophisticated in using those funds and be able to deploy them in more areas. But I just wanted to talk really quickly. One area we've worked in is in Binghamton. It's got a lot of the elements that I talked about earlier. So it's not in a vacuum. We're working there with community partners. So Binghamton Development Corporation, Center for Transforming Communities as our engagement arm, and they've of course been doing engagement there for a while. We've worked with the Binghamton TIF Steering Committee. So many other partners that we're able to work with there, aligning the city division. So it's not just our department, our division trying to work, but we're also working with housing and community development. We're working with public works, engineering, and several other divisions to say, how can we have maximum impact in this area? We're working a strategy. And so in the comprehensive plan, there are elements specific to, right now we're working in the Tillman Cove anchor. So there are specific recommendations for Tillman Cove anchor, and the Binghamton community has also developed their TIF strategy plan that lays out what they want to see in their community and a little bit of how they want to see it. And so combining those two efforts, we're able to support that very clear strategy so that we're all on one page. And what we've been able to do there really early on is some blight remediation. And so there were some apartment buildings, Tillman Cove apartments, that have been around for quite a while and have been vacant, I think, since maybe 2016. And we were able to, through the Catalyst Fund, demolish those apartments. We've been able to work with Binghamton Development Corporation and Center for Transforming Communities and HCD to engage the community around the area on the the future redevelopment proposal. There has been a developer selected for that, and they will be doing, it's Elmington Capital, they'll be doing apartment house, multifamily housing in that area, still working on the development plan. But one thing the community wanted to see is a high level of affordability. And so we've been able to convene some of those conversations around affordability, around open space, around the design of the area. And so I think that's really just supporting not only the strategy, the comprehensive plan, but most importantly, the neighborhood desires and things that they've been talking about and asking for a number of years. And then we hope over the next year in 2021 to continue our support in that area through commercial support, commercial activation, open space activation. There are a couple of open space areas that can be supported and kind of programmed with different activities and other types of community support as responded to by community. This is my last slide. The other place that we're working, and this is working in tandem with the Catalyst Fund, but also with a tool that's new to the area, the TIF district. It's in Raleigh at Austin Peay and Yale, the former Raleigh Springs Mall site. I think now the home of the Raleigh Civic Center. We're working there with partners. So during the planning of that work, we worked, of course, with community residents. We worked with the Raleigh CDC and then other city divisions who have been working in that area. City alignment, we've been working with HCD again, the Parks Department related to their community center in that area, and some other parks and different types of improvements. One thing that we've heard from the residents and that felt like low-hanging fruit was public Wi-Fi, and I think the timing was great. We've been able to offer free and public Wi-Fi around the Raleigh Community Center, and so that's great as most people are at home and having to access the majority of their work and school functions at home. That just provides some relief and another option for folks if they want to kind of get out the house but still be able to use Wi-Fi in a certain area. The strategy was developed. So in this case, we developed a small area plan for the Raleigh community, and we developed it, like I said, with the CDC, with the neighborhood groups, with a few business owners as well within that process. And some of the outcomes that we've been implementing now are some infrastructure improvements. So community members said as the library was moving to a different location, young people use the library and they'll have to cross Austin Peay. And so they wanted to think about how can they promote safety and make sure the children are not in danger and that cars are respectful of them as they try to cross the street to the library after school like they do currently or like they did when school was meeting in person. We've worked with community members for a project that's not, I'll say this, it's not super transformative. It's what we think of as placemaking, and you can see the image in the kind of colorful image. Those are some banners. We heard from communities that they wanted some level of identity. And so we said, that's something that's easy. It doesn't cost a lot of money. And it's a way to really promote this area and give community members opportunity to select an artist, to really select the artwork that defines their community. And so we've been able to work with them on that. And then also some transit upgrades. So there were a few locations where there was not a physical bus shelter. People would have to wait outside in the rain if they were waiting to use the bus. And so we've been able to relocate a shelter. We are adding a new shelter with some other amenities like lighting, basic things like schedule boxes, Wi-Fi once the library and center kind of come on board. So we're really excited about that work. And what we were able to do after the completion of the small area plan was to take that strategy and work with formal councilmen and a commissioner and work with EDGE to implement a TIF district for that area. And so now those funds can eventually support the strategy that was developed. And so those are just some ways that we've started the work around catalytic development and implementing the theory behind the plan. Abby, I'm going to turn it to you. I just stopped sharing my screen. And so if you want to pick up and share your screen, we can do that.
Sure, thank you. I will share it now. Can y'all see the slide deck that I have?
Yes.
So just building, I know we're pushing against time, so I'll go through ours fairly quickly, but building off of the sort of macro context that Tracy introduced and then the city context that Ashley went through, the Memphis Medical District Collaborative is just one district in the city of Memphis, and we're using a catalytic or anchor-based development strategy here. So I'm just going to share sort of some background on us and some of the best practices or results that we've been able to achieve using this type of development strategy. As mentioned, I'm the Executive Vice President of the Medical District Collaborative, and our goal is really to make the medical district more livable, vibrant, and safe. And so really building off of what Tracy shared earlier, you know, our residential demographics are pretty grim. We have 46% households below the poverty line. Our median income is not $20,000, and we're largely a renter-occupied homes in the district. And really our total demographic is about 10,000 residents today, which at our peak in the 1970s, there were about 30,000 residents in the medical district. But on the other hand, in the medical district itself, looking at not one anchor, but what we consider our anchor institutions, we have a cluster of over 20,000 employees. We have over 7,000 students, almost $1 billion in local procurement, and the anchors collectively own about 300 acres of real estate. So while we don't have one single Amazon in the district, we like to think that our collection of anchor institutions provides that the same sort of innovation and employee base and student base and really innovation base that makes this district really benefit from thinking about anchor or catalytic development. So we realized back in 2016 that in order to help revitalize the medical district, that the major anchor hospitals and universities had to come together collectively to take action. And that led to the founding of the Memphis Medical District Collaborative. So we define anchor institutions slightly differently than the city. We're really looking at eds and meds as economic engines. So they're centers of employment, destinations for students, large purchasers. They have innovation and research, and they often own large amounts of real estate. And what we do is we take the outputs of those anchor institutions, we look at the graduates, healthcare and research, as I mentioned, and then we also look at the faculty, the staff, the goods and services, the real estate, and we try to connect those three core areas, people, investment, and place, to meet the overall strategies that the community has for itself. So that may be residential housing, it may be investment in small business, it may be jobs, it may be better parks and public spaces. But what we do with our specific strategy is look at those those three main categories: people, dollar, and place, and how we can leverage those to maximize community benefit. So our goals, as I won't go through everything on the screen, is really to look at how we leverage those anchor institutions, increase housing, strengthen our commercial corridors, improve public life, and enhance the overall safety and security of the district. And I won't go through each of these, but this just shows that real estate and real estate development is just one arm of the multitude of programs that we engage in. So we have several that are specifically place-based, looking at quality public spaces, events and opportunities, community engagement, small business development, looking at our anchor programs like Live, Buy, Hire, and transportation, and then looking at real estate development as a part of that overall ecosystem. So in terms of our real estate role specifically, we are not a real estate developer per se, but we really look at property acquisition, pre-development support for projects, so how to get projects off the ground. We do a lot to coordinate partners and connect to capital, and we provide ongoing technical assistance to assure that we have quality, mixed income, vibrant projects coming to the medical district. And this goes off of Tracy's point. We are definitely, if you looked at the market strength of our real estate market, we are definitely not a strong or established market. We really see ourselves in the medical district and the city as a rising market, which means that we do need high institutional support from city partners and others. We need subsidy and coordination, and deals tend to be slower than in a stronger or more well-established market. So just to give you a quick overview, these are really the top developments and expansions that are underway, both institutional as well as private or business investments in the medical district. So while we don't have that one catalytic project, or we're not following that model that sort of Jane Jacobs cautioned against, we're really looking at a series of scattered and strategic investments throughout the medical district that will be used to be catalytic and transformative of the district itself. So then just to go into, in addition to the residential development, we have complementary programs to enhance and increase neighborhood and community benefit all along the way. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of examples. One is our Live Local program. So our Live Local program is an incentive that can be used by employees of the institutions toward a rental apartment or toward a purchase. To date, we've attracted and retained 130 new residents into the district, and the demographics of those participants were 40% earning less than $40,000 a year, 57% African American, and 80% female. So those were the by and large participants who benefited from being able to take advantage of some of the new housing opportunities in the medical district and moving closer to their place of work. We have a program called Buy Local, where we look at anchor institution procurement to increase the local spend. We have increased our total local non-medical spend by 60% since 2015. We've introduced 672 local suppliers, and we've increased diverse spend by $17.5 million since 2015. So just by paying attention to who we're purchasing from and how we're purchasing, we've been able to collectively have a great economic impact into the local economy. In terms of community economic development, that small business work, we've, since 2016, helped start 38 new businesses, and 43 businesses in the district, both new and existing, have received facade improvement dollars or planning assistance to improve the quality of their existing spaces. So it's not just about attracting new businesses, but about supporting the businesses that are already here. And then we have our Hire Local program, which is specifically looking to increase the economic opportunity of residents in and around the medical district. So the anchor institutions have committed 100 jobs for residents in the medical district. And so far, we have completed 30 residents in our first training cohort this year. And our goal for this year is to ensure that 25 residents have active employment at the anchor institutions. And my last slide here is just talking about overall community engagement strategy. And for us, it's multiple tactics. It's not really one thing. So we want to help our neighbors organize, build capacity, and create partnerships. We regularly convene through meetings, meetups, and other activities in the district. We listen to employees, students, residents, and visitors of the district in all of our projects and planning. And we are constantly creating points of connection and opportunities for information throughout the medical district. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen so that we can open up the conversation.
And thanks, Abby. That was great. I feel like we've done our panel or our attendees a small disservice because I think we've run out of time for Q&A. I have been trying to answer a handful of the questions in the chat, and my contact information, I think Tanja put my contact information in there if folks have additional questions. I believe Kelly Walton is going to send out the presentation. I see a lot of questions asking if she'll send out the presentation. We can make sure we've got all of our contact information there so you can get in touch with any of us. Kelly, do we have time to respond to some questions? I'm not seeing you, or are we at a hard stop? I don't know what the panelists have either. Yes, she says the presentation will be forwarded. I'm not getting any notes. So real quick, while we have a couple of minutes, I just wanted to ask to the group, and this is a real quick question to Tracy and Abby until we get kicked off. So I think one of the things, if folks aren't concerned with very specific development questions, which I see a couple in the chat, one thing that I know is burning in people's mind, and I've seen questions similar, are just thinking and talking about equity or community benefits in development. We have started to think about those things. I know that our city has had, various types of presentations to either council or individual groups on what CBAs, community benefits agreements, could be, and how strict to how loose they are. And so that's something that we want to step into in our office, and participatory budgeting in our office. Right now, the ways that we've been able to really support equity is through affordability. So making sure that housing developments that are being developed, at least under the premise of 3.0, are affordable. We've also worked with, of course, our city around Memphis and minority spending. But and I got the note from Kelly, 1 to 2 questions. So if you, Tracy, want to maybe talk for a minute, and then Abby and Tanja, if y'all want to jump in and just talk about maybe either how y'all deal with or how we could deal with equity and making sure communities benefit from these wonderful catalytic projects, that would be great.
Sure, thanks for that question, Ashley. What I'd like to toss out there, and I'll offer this just as a quick comment because I know we're short on time, is that community benefits agreements are often transactional, and they confer a one-time cost to the developer, and they're an extraction. They're just a different form of an impact fee or a proffer. And what I would encourage people to think about for advancing catalytic development as a model, and to think about how to make it as progressive as possible, is to think about more structural models for building benefits and investing benefits into the community. Some of the ideas that Abby was talking about are already getting more towards structural. But the biggest picture here is to think about, if you think about catalytic development as literally investment in change that's happening in a place, how can more people get a stake and a piece of that? Abby talked about employment opportunities and procurement, and those are good examples of that. But I encourage people to think the biggest, and the next step is to start talking about ownership. And if that's not literally home ownership, to talk about looking broadly across the assets in the place. Are there new models that we need to create or import from other case studies that we can find out there for how to create ownership structures that are feasible for more people to get a stake in the change and the prosperity that's happening.
I would just add to that, what the term that we're really focused on is community wealth building. And I think that wealth building concept can mean a lot of different things depending. We do have a relatively low number of residents in the medical district. So we have a more, we are working with a pool of about 10,000 people. And those are really around connections to employment opportunities, small business opportunities, connections for helping to leverage a TIF expansion area to improve the residential quality. We have a citywide program that we incubated around small and incremental development. So, I think the short answer is it's not just one thing, and it's probably never just going to be one thing. To me, it's about crafting and building a strategy that responds to the assets that you have on one side and then responds to the residential interest and priority on the other side. So, it's just about being engaged in the community that you're working in and seeing that. I think a lot of times where we miss the mark is we think about it later or after. It's like we get the big real estate project and then we think about how to engage community. We don't do the type of long-term, less transactional type of neighborhood engagement that means when a project comes, you're already engaged in that area. So it's less transactional. And for us, a core investment in that space has in areas where we had less neighborhood organization. So we were very fortunate to have folks like Tanja in the Uptown area who had been very organized, who had been leading for a long time. But then we had other areas or pockets in the medical district where people had been less regularly organizing and meeting. And so we've been fostering that type of neighborhood work, barbecues, block parties, opportunities for people to gather and share and learn, such that when a development opportunity is in the pipeline, those connected neighborhood relationships are stronger, and that neighborhoods can have their voice at the table.
Not second enough what Abby just said about how important civic infrastructure is.
Yes.
As the first part of that, whether it's a church, whether it's a CDC, whether it's a barbecue, that is such an important first step.
So much so. And Tanja, we're over, and I appreciate everybody hanging in with us. Tanja, I was going to ask if you just want to share closing remarks. You have probably worked more closely with residents than most of us here on this panel. And so closing remarks about just thinking about equity and inclusion and how we can all work to do that a little bit better.
Right. I would agree with what Abby said. It's very important to get residents involved on the front end. And you do that, not just for the project per se, but prior to that, have meetings with the residents, have events, find a common ground, something that the residents would be interested in. So when you have this serious conversation, you already have your residents at the table. And like Abby said, we work together on a lot of community engagement projects. I'm really hoping that the medical district will bring Treatum back. That was one of our most successful projects, but it's just all about relationships, having relationships with residents on every level. And they have to earn your trust. You know what I'm saying? They have to trust you before they listen to any ideals or any projects that's coming in. So yes, in community engagement, it's key. It's needed. It's critical.
Great. It's been a pleasure to And my day, just kind of learning and hearing from people all across the country related to housing and housing issues, and seeing the great conversation in the chat. And then, of course, being on this panel with all these rock stars. Thanks everybody for joining us, for hanging in. 10 minutes over. We must have piqued your interest because the number stayed up. It didn't go down to zero. That means we were giving y'all good information. So I appreciate that. I look forward to hearing from y'all, and the slides will go out with our contact information. Y'all have a wonderful afternoon.